concept to invite the same people who contributed to our conference on the 1st of December last year. So they have agreed, the three of them, so I'm very pleased. And I would like to first welcome Mario Milouchev, your director at DG Agriculture and Rural Development. Good morning, Mario. For the society, I welcome Hannes Lorenzen, your co-president of the Association Forum for Synergy, also member of ARC 2020. Good morning, Hannes. And for research, I welcome Karen Refsgaard. Karen is a research director at Nordregio, a partner of SHERPA. So good morning to the three of you, and thank you very much for having accepted to be with us today. So what we will do during this session is revisit some of the elements that have been discussed last year. I have selected three topics, it's three points, three questions that we will discuss. And for each of these points, there will be two questions that will be asked to the panel. The first question is, how did the vision change the situation in relation to this point? And the second question is, what remains to be done? What are the biggest challenges, the most important aspects for making it happen? Okay, so this is the principle of the panel discussion. The first topic is related to one of the points I just mentioned, is the need for evidence, statistics, and data on rural area. So during last year's conference, the point was made that there was a need to improve our knowledge on rural area. Mario, if you remember, you illustrated this by explaining that depending on the typology, we had different results. When we were using the urban-rural typology, the predominantly rural regions were for 45% of EU territory, and if we are using the degree of urbanization classification, it was 75. So you made the point that it was important that we get the right data. You also questioned if there was a central data collection rural think tank in Europe that collects, analyzes, and consolidates data. Karen, you also mentioned that last year. You highlighted the need for better data, improved analysis on the potential economic leak from rural area and innovation capacity. So first question to you, Mario, how did the rural vision help to improve, or how the rural vision will help to improve the availability of data and evidence?
Thank you very much, Olivier. Good morning, everybody. I see there are 92 participants, and I'm very happy that we repeat the panel with Karen and Hans that we had more than 1 year ago. Thank you very much. I will reply to your question, but before, I would like to say a few introductory words related to the rural vision. Let me start by congratulating you for the excellent work that you are carrying out in SHERPA. It has definitely contributed to our thinking on the vision. You could see your position paper on the long-term vision for rural areas, and your analysis quoted several times in the staff working document. And I hope that you can find some common ground between the result of your work in multi-actor platforms on the ground and the shared goals that we have put in our communication. You mentioned already that Alexia presented yesterday the vision, so I will say only a few words. In fact, I would like to share with you that both the approach and the vision are a big novelty for the Commission, because the previous Commission communication, which was adopted by the College and which was dedicated entirely and exclusively to the rural areas, including all aspects of their social and economic life, was adopted in 1988. Probably you don't know this fact, but it was still, the Iron Curtain was there. There was no internet. Practically, there were the European Community, not the European Union, and only 12 member states. So in addition to this novelty, we have for the first time a visionary document, because last time there was no vision, and we cover the coming 20 years until 2040. The second element is that this is the first attempt of the Commission in putting elements of all EU policy together. EU policies in view of the development of the rural areas. So previously we mainly spoke about cohesion and common agricultural policies, but it is not anymore the case. And we also show that rural areas are not always associated with agriculture, although, of course, agriculture has a special place. And also something for the first time that happens, we are outside of the pure economy. For the first time, we are in the non-economic strand, work strand of the Commission working program, which is democracy and demography. And you see in the rural vision several aspects taken on board without forgetting the political and the politics ones. And because, Olivier, you are a project about interfaces between policy and society, I would like to flag that the consultation we carried out to build the vision was the first ever big public consultation on rural areas. All the previous consultations, they were numerous, but they were on the common agricultural policy. And this time it was specific, with specific Eurobarometer surveys, with special questions, with the fact that we did not only consult, but made people actively contribute. And also we organized several events at the EU national and local level with the same objective. And we had also a foresight exercise, which was conducted in an open and participative manner with inclusion of many stakeholders. And of course, the vision and the shared goals were to a large extent conceived there. And what I would like to pass as a message, because these novelties were, in my view, successful, and we intend to keep this bottom-up and this participative approach in the future implementation process. I will come back to this, but let me now answer your question. How did the vision improve data and evidence? First, as I mentioned, we conducted a huge analytical work. You can see this in the staff working document that accompanies the vision and that provides data, indicators, and insight on 12 different themes. This gives us, in my view, very good baseline. It is not perfect. Of course, this is not enough. We still miss data that is relevant and collected at a sufficiently local scale. But at least we brought into one paper the best data sources that we have at present across all policies and all fields of expertise. This allowed us to highlight the gaps where we miss the data to properly describe the challenges and opportunities. And because we found that there are gaps, because what we have done is good but is not enough, we included in the action plan several actions to strengthen the evidence. So we will set up in the Commission a rural observatory, and here I refer to the think tank that we spoke 1 year ago. The observatory will cover 5 blocks of themes. It will create a rural data platform and will be accessible to all, and it will produce a number of analytical papers each year. We are working together with the Joint Research Center to create this observatory this year, still in 2022. And the other aspect I would like to mention, for me it is interesting for this audience, we have an action to develop the concept of functional rural area. You may have heard about the term functional urban area, which describes the area that includes a big city and its hinterland or its commuting zone. Of course, a proportion of rural areas is included in such functional urban areas, but a good proportion is not included. So we would like to see how this similar concept can be applied to rural areas and to show how a given rural areas is functionally related to others. And I finish with also saying that we invest in research into this. We have allocated 15 million euro under the Horizon Europe program to support 2 projects that will look into definitions of rural areas, develop this concept on functional rural areas, and develop new data collection methods. So these projects will start before the summer. This would be my reply to your question. I promise in the next interventions to be a little bit shorter, but this was just to enter the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mario, and really no problem. It's very good to give the context as well. So Hannes, the question is, what remains to be done? In your view, what are the most important challenges ahead when talking about availability and sharing of data and evidence?
Thank you very much for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be again in this round of reflection. And of course, my congratulations also to the work that has been done within the Commission, all the steps from the vision to now the proposal for a pact and platform. I was unfortunately not able to contribute much to the work of SHERPA, but I appreciate very much this interface which you've created and which you continue to create between people doing really scientific work and working with data and kind of stimulating policymakers to take these ideas into consideration. My main concern is time. I've been involved in all the vision work and now into the thematic group on rural revitalization, which I would prefer should be vitalization. It sounds a bit like reanimation. And I'm looking forward to work much more on action. And I think what you have chosen as a title for this conference, Make It Happen, is the key. Unfortunately, this vision process, this whole vision process, and the data that are being collected in this phase are coming when we have a reform on the common agriculture policy, including rural development, already done and closed. And it is really a pity that at this stage we have to talk about a future starting from 2028 to 34. And that you as SHERPA will start working at that while so much needs to be done now. And my question, and we've very shortly discussed that with Mario, my question is, what can be done to make it happen now? We know a lot of things that need to be changed, not only in CAP, but also in rural policies. Now the member states are making their rural development programs. And if we want to change the framework in which this vision can be realized, it needs to be done now. So my first little provocative point would be to Mario saying, why wouldn't you stimulate member states with this vision to change possibly parts of their rural development plans, taking also into account a proposal that came also pretty late, which was the Green Deal and the biodiversity strategy. I think it's an awkward situation that we know what needs to be changed, that we have data, that we have scientists who've worked out a lot of things that need to be done now. And we say, well, that will happen after 28. What is going to happen between now and 28? A lot of things will be changing and demanding us to do on climate measures. So my key message here is I think we should look at exactly what Mario mentioned, what is unfortunately missing, the level of local data, the level not only of data, but of people who do actions under the conditions which are not the ideal ones we are now imagining for from 2028. My feeling is we are in a golden cage of wisdom about what should and could be done in rural development. things, but we are not close enough to the problems of people on the local level. And let me perhaps add, also to be a little bit long like Mario, 2 examples of what I'm talking about. We are just preparing a book called Rural Europe in Action. What we are looking at is, where are people doing, in spite of unreformed policies, where are people already doing something? And what are their conclusions? What should be changed now, in this period, in this programming period? And we have found bakers, so-called free bakers in Germany, who are trying to be the intermediate between, consumers and farmers, and working with material which is relevant for climate change. And that is wheat populations which adapt to climate change, right? This is something that comes out of the organic regulation, a possibility to farmers to work with that material. And they have found out as bakers that gives a very good quality of bread. Now, their problem is they are working with smaller quantities, which mills don't accept. Mills want a certain amount of tons to do it. So they have to make a big effort, costing times, distance, gasoline, to find a smaller mill, right? Same for a brewery here in near Brussels, doing Goes and Lambic, a beer that takes 3 years to be produced. And they do 800 kilometers to find a malting a facility for their specific malt. So what are we going to do between now and 2028 so that we really get an infrastructure? We're always talking about diversification, short food chains, all that is wonderful in our golden cage, but what exactly will be done now with this programming period so that that kind of infrastructure is being developed? And that these kind of initiatives and actions which people take will not disappear until that time when our vision is going to be put into practice. So I just wanted to give these 2 very concrete examples which we have gathered to say, it's good to have all this wisdom about what should change, but what will the Commission concretely do to influence member states now when you negotiate the strategic plans to go in that direction, to really concretely say, what are you going to do to respond to the challenges we all know, and how will you develop the data on which you can develop that? So sorry for being a bit long, but I think that was the kind of question you raised, Olivier, and I hope I can provoke Mario a little bit to react to that.
Thank you, Hannes. Mario, do you want to reply now, or shall I give the floor to
it's good Karen? Also for Karen probably
exactly,
to say something, and then.
So Karen, same question. So taking the important challenges remaining in improving availability, sharing of data and evidence. That's the first question.
Thank you.
So Hannes made a clear point on action now.
Yeah.
What is your view?
Well, thank you very much. It's nice to be asked or to follow up on last year's discussion. I think that was a very good approach. I'm the lucky one who was also involved in the SHERPA project, in addition to being the research director at Nordregio. Well, I looked a bit into the more details on your questions about these data and evidence questions. I think there are 3 important points to make when it comes to, yesterday we were presented about stronger, connected, resilient, and prosperous actions in this vision. And I think we need to think quite carefully. Indicators is a lot. So when we talk about rural areas, we historically have just looked at more time or kilometers to the urban areas and population density, etc. I think there's a lot of other indicators which are quite key to get in order to understand actually these differences that the rural areas have. So first of all, wage indicators, but secondly, very much about the quality, and thirdly, also issues related to the geographical levels. And when I say wage indicators, I think one could also think of it differently in maybe the new rural observatory as you are developing. I mean, it's both about what is that people need. They need access. They are people, they are families, they need access to services. They need access to schools, shops, 5G, basic health, etc. And I can just tell that, and generally also more varied employment to match the skills. They also need access to recreational things that drive the movements in and out of the areas. And we also know in this pandemic, we also know that attitude employers to distant working matters for the opportunity to live in rural areas. And we also need to think about, I think, if you think about what is the businesses need, well, first of all, as also Hannah said, good digital and physical infrastructure for the access to markets, for access to skilled labor markets, but also access to the right education, to apprentices that will come to the businesses, and to good opportunities for innovation. And finally, I think the communities, and I'll come back to that, they need very good data on local employment, local economic growth. There's a lot of biased indicators, which I'll come back to on the qualities. The final thing I would mention when it comes to which indicators is on greenhouse gas emissions. And I'll come back to that as well when it comes to quality. So I think one should add to this definition we have today of measuring distance in time and population density. There is a lot missing there when it comes to what are really the definition rural areas. When it comes to the quality of the indicators, I mentioned that last year as well. I think it's very, very important to get much better economic indicators. I mean, we are relying on economic models that are based on the historical economic patterns. They do not reveal the economic structure today. They use them in the finance ministries. We use them in when we are calculating innovation and capacity. As a simple example, the Vestas wind turbine industry in Denmark, most of the labor is in rural areas, but the head offices has now moved to Aarhus, the big city. Therefore, the innovation capacity is calculated in Aarhus, but it's not happening there. This is a simple thing, but it's very important. I also saw that you had a lot of thoughts about cost effectiveness in delivering services. We discussed that last year. But in this cost effectiveness, when we talk about services, we do not consider, for example, environmental impacts. Let's say the congestion in cities, the impacts on health, the pollution, and time as well also has a cost. So finally, I think there's a lack of good data on changes in municipal expenditures and revenues over time. And I think all these are quite important elements in calculating rural employment and opportunities in most European countries and in the remote areas. And of course, Eurostat has a key role there. At Nordregio, we gather data. You are mentioning the Rural Observatory. OECD collects data. I think it's very important that we think together, and I can just mention that we are about to sign a memorandum of understanding with OECD on some of these issues, which I think we really need to do better work. With the third, and related to that is, of course, the whole idea around the greenhouse gas emissions, which until now has been land-based or production-based. That means where you produce the goods and services, they are the ones who are tracked for the emissions. But most research tells us that the more you earn, the higher the income, the more you emit. We also know that a lot of the emissions are embodied outside our countries. And if you do analysis, you know that more latest calculations from the Danish statistical offices show that over 50% of the consumption, if you use consumption-based emissions, are coming from China or Bangladesh, or where we produce all the goods and services. Today, in our land-based calculations, these things are not considered. And of course, this is also a problem for rural areas, because we have most of the resources in rural areas, but the consumption and the, let's say, the expensive infrastructure, in addition to consumption, also like houses, concrete, is in cities. Then the final thing is on this sharing data, which you also asked about, and I think media, of course, is very important, but they need to get good research, they need to get good quality indicators to gain a public understanding of support. We had a conference from Nordregio in the end of 2021, and I was quite happy to hear the head of the Nordic Council of Ministers, the Secretary General. She was also pointing, for example, to the consumption-based greenhouse gas emissions. I think that the work on the ground, as you do very well, or we do well in the SHERPA maps, is a fantastic place to start. But these people need really to have power. They have to have good analysis to show to the finance ministers, for example. So this is the research. So I'm very happy also to hear about there's 2 new projects coming up in the horizon. I think that was my main points on the first. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karen. So a lot of thought there, Mario, for the observatory. I think Karen gives some good indications on needs for the observatory that is going to be set up this year. And thank you for giving these details. So as Hannes asked you directly a question, Mario, I think you made this point already last year, Hannes, on acting now. So you're consistent, at least, which is very good. So Mario, I think there are things already ongoing, but I give you the floor to reply to Hannes before we move to the second topic.
Yeah, I will try with 3 points to reply to all the remarks. First, to Hannes. Well, Hannes, it was shown by Olivier that SHERPA would like to work on 2028. We also would like to work, but we are working now. So first, at this very moment, we are approving in AGRI the CAP strategic plans. We are evaluating them. And in this very moment, Regio is evaluating the operational programs under the Cohesion Fund. So this is a moment where we are commenting on rural areas based also on the data that we have in the rural vision. But in particular for the CAP plans, I would like to mention the farm to fork recommendations from December 2020. And if you look in the specific objective 8 there, it is entirely dedicated to the rural areas. For every member state, you can find an analysis, and for every member state, you can find a recommendation. What I would like to say here, not to be very long, is that in the next steps at the end of the communication, you will find something probably interesting for you, that in the mid of next year, there will be a stock-taking exercise. So this stock-taking exercise will see what we do now at this moment, what we have done, what we have achieved for the rural areas, both in the operational programs and in the CAP plans, and to identify gaps and probably to ask member states to rectify in the current programs and current plans. That is to be seen. And this will feed the report in 24 also for the new period. But here it is very important to mention, hoping that it is not politically incorrect, but we have a very, very strong, two very, very strong lobbies in this process that we are ongoing now. This is, as you mentioned, also green lobby, which is very good, and AGRI lobby, which is also very good. But sometimes the green, the AGRI lobby are competing with the rural vision, with the rural areas lobby. So there is no infinite money. And sometimes between these lobbies, there is an equilibrium which should be found. So this was the first element. I hope that in a way I replied mainly with the stock taking and the farm to fork recommendations. The second element is that we need the challenge we have is that we need data at local level and not just case study data, but regular indicators and statistics, which will help us and which are updated often enough. And this is very, very costly to obtain. And that's why we are investing in research to develop new data collection methods, building on satellite imagery or crowdsourcing of data. I suppose you know what this is. And my third point is referring to Karen's remarks. It is we have different type of rural areas. We spoke several times on this. But as you referred, Karen, to the OECD made a very, very good report. And they made a distinction between rural areas depending on how far from a city they are. And we underlined in the rural vision the importance of the remote rural areas. And here we should refine our indicators to differentiate rural areas close to cities and remote rural areas. And when I speak about remote rural areas, there are bluntly, to the extreme, two views. Some say in Europe, there are no remote rural areas except for very far away in Sweden and very far away in Finland, in the northern part of these two countries. These are our remote areas. In fact, if I refer to the OECD, I would say that remote areas are those rural areas which are on more than 1 hour drive from a city. And when you say a city, I refer here to what Karen, you said, that it is not just a small town without anything, but it is about city where we have a hospital, when we have cultural possibilities, when we have a railway station, when possibly we have airport, possibly we can have a university. So it is not just to something very small. And there are many remote areas like this. If you take in Eastern Europe, for example, even the countries are very small, but the roads and the infrastructure are not so good. So 1 hour drive sometimes is not so many kilometers. And we should take care, especially on these remote areas. And I would like that in June, in the Rural Pact conference, we discussed a little bit how we can particularly focus on this. But these are the three elements, in order not to be very, very long, which are also elements for reflection to the audience today. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the three of you. So in your last 2 points, Mario, you talked about getting the challenges of getting data at local level. You talk about also remote areas, which bring us to the second topic, which is the diversity of rural area. So how to account for the diversity of rural area? It's a point that you have made last year, Mario. In your intervention, you said, well, what does it mean when we say there is a lot of diversity among rural area? And does it create difficulties to create a coherent policy? Actually, the work we've been doing in SHERPA last year showed that despite this diversity, that there's also a lot of similarities in the needs, in the challenges, in the opportunities. In the work we've done on the foresight, for example, we had 5 maps, and we're quite surprised to see that at the end, from the 4 scenarios that were given as an option, all the different territories, they chose the same. So there's a lot of similarities as well. So the question here, and I will start with you again, Mario, is to anchor with the work on the long-term vision, is how does the long-term vision take into account this diversity? And the following question would be, taking into account the diversity, how can we develop a coherent policy framework at EU level?
Thank you.
Mario, you want to start?
Thank you, Olivier. Well, first, I said that there have been an extensive consultation and the stakeholders engagement exercise. We have collected views from a wide diversity of areas and stakeholders. And as you said, for every challenge or opportunity, we identified there is a lot of diversity across member states within a given country and also in different regions. For example, to be concrete, if we look at broadband coverage, some areas do well, while others are lagging far behind. When we look at the depopulation, we see some areas had lost people for decades and are regaining population now, when in others the exodus is still going on in spite of COVID, by the way. The point I made about the remote rural areas, I just made this point is valid here. When we ask the question, do you feel left behind by society? On average, in the rural areas, there were more people answering, no, I do not feel left behind, than those responding yes. However, the percentage of those responding yes was big. But if you look at the answers of people living in the remote areas, in the sense that I explained, over 60% of them said they felt left behind, and that's really a lot. As you mentioned in SHERPA, there is diversity, but we identified also a lot of common ground. And even if the problems and the areas differ in scale, they are very much the same, and the problems are the same, and the opportunities are similar. This is visible in your work. SHERPA, and the vision spelled out common grounds in the 10 shared goals that are in the communication, and back the Rural Pact that we launched in December, and the first event will be in June. And my last point is that the diversity should not be an obstacle to a coherent policy framework. On many subjects, the situation in the member states in the area differs, but this should not prevent us from building policies for them. If you look at the cities, they are also diverse. And the argument of diversity, and that scares me sometimes, has often been used as an excuse not to develop a holistic entire rural policy. And with the vision, I hope that we have demonstrated there is enough common ground to justify the joint action. So this would be my first reaction to your question.
Thank you very much. So Hannes, I saw you nodding there on the point of Mario. So what is your view on this?
I think he's completely right. One shouldn't take diversity as an excuse not to move. I would like to challenge a little bit this idea that we need more data on diversity. Because it seems that it's the top level that needs it, the European level that needs the understanding of the diversity in order then to be very diverse in the interventions. I think Mario is right. We need a coherent framework which works for the great diversity, but doesn't necessarily, go into details of all the diversity that exists. And I have the feeling that the bottom-up approach, which the Commission many years ago started with LEADER, is kind of getting lost a bit in this perspective, because we have so many nice elements also in the vision, but also in the CAP strategic plans and so on, which says we need more cooperation, we need more empowerment of people. Well, it's not just about data to empower people. It is about communication. It is about negotiation, about different interests. And Mario mentioned that, there are two different lobbies. I think there are more, but let's take the two ones. It's not just about the money that goes somewhere. It is about the recognition that people can do on their place, if they are in a good way supported, they can find the right answers to the diversity. And I mentioned that right at the beginning. If people start trying to establish what we all say should be there, improved food chains on a local level, well, then they should be empowered to establish that kind of infrastructure, which makes it possible. And unfortunately, I don't see that happening. I see a lot of good intentions. I see a lot of data being available, but I don't see sufficient investment into places, into spaces where we empower people to solve the problems they have where they are. And from all the things we have so far collected on where is the action in rural Europe, is that people say, we don't have the space, we don't have the support to really establish a way of planning, which is our planning, which is responding to our specific problems, which is giving us also the tools to be on a level playing field with the people who have no clue of what is happening in our region, right? So if they want to get in touch with people who are responsible for planning, they need to have the skills and the possibilities to communicate on a level playing field with them so that they can influence the things that are necessary. And sorry, Mario, I absolutely agree. It was very nice to have all those consultations, but I think people are kind of tired of being consulted on so many ways, on so many different projects, and they want to get to action. They want to see where is concretely in our place the possibility of solving ourselves the problems we have. And I think the focus should lie when you check, the strategic plans. We do that at R2. When you check through, cross-read through it, where are these elements also in the implementation of CAP reform in relation to what is needed in rural areas? Sorry for being a bit long, but I think that was important to be a bit more precise about diversity and what is linked to it.
Thank you very much, Anna. So over to you, Karen. I see we have 5 minutes left, and I'd like to have a last word from each of you at the end. I think you have other commitment as well at 10:30. So Karen, over to you, and then I have a last round for last remark from each of you. Karen.
Okay. I hear that the comments on data. I think we could phrase it that way. It's the empowerment of data, because I really think that it's because we're a bit blind, because there's a lot of hidden economic models being used for showing that innovation, that ideas, that entrepreneurship is happening in the cities, which we can trace back and figure out it's actually not. So I think there is a very important need, but it's maybe, as you would say, Hannes, we need to empower people to use these data and use them in the right places. And but just turning back to this second topic, which was about diversity in general, I think there's an eternal challenge embedded in this difference between the sectoral and the territorial approach. We can't get around that, and Mary said that also we're competing with green and the environmental and the agricultural sector. And rural areas is a territory consisting of a lot of different types of businesses, of families, of residents out there with different needs. And we will never get around it as long as it is within a specific sector. But then the long-term vision for rural areas is certainly a very good attempt. And I just thought about this, about, I mean, the diversity is really responding to some of the very big challenges these days. I mean, you're talking about resilience, for example. Take a single industrial town, which we can find in the northern part of Sweden, where they only have iron mining. There's one industry. All families are relying on that. That is a very big challenge in a time where that production may be hit, or we have to turn into green. What are they supposed to do? I mean, you have a lot of resilience, at least economic resilience, if you have a diversity in your sectors. You also have a lot of resilience that if you have different types of skills out there that are being used, you have families, they have needs for different services, they need for different types of jobs, they provide different types of education. So when you have a diversity in sectors, you have a diversity in sizes of businesses, and you have different types that fulfill the needs of the different age groups, then I think if you can capture that in the diversity of these rural territories in the rural observatory, then I think you'll show quite a nice picture of these different areas in Europe. And then I'll just also say, I think also LIDA could be developed. I think there's a lot of good things in the LIDA when it arises that one can replace and reform and to restore these links between local initiative takers and EU policymakers. And the final note I just want to do, if I have time, is this about democracy. I saw there was a comment on it. And I think it's very important also for the local level and their empowerment that we think about the young people and we think about the businesses. I think that's the only one I'm missing here in the SHERPA platform, is that we have too few young people represented in many of our maps. They're hard to get. We also have too few businesses. And I think they are so important for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. We had a representative of a young farmer yesterday at the conference, but yeah, still progress to be made. Thank you all really for this lively discussion. I see we're reaching the end, but I'd like to give a last opportunity for a comment, and maybe for your last intervention, a couple of words on the roles of the stakeholders, different stakeholders at different level in the next step. So one last short intervention. Let's try to make it in 5 minutes for the three of you, if that's possible. So Mario, I propose that you start, then Hannes, and then Karen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Olivier, because we are at the end. I have prepared also some other things just to mention, because I saw in the chat also, and Karen mentioned about this, leader and smart villages are very important for enabling the local communities, and we are going to push on them. But I will stop here. For the stakeholders and the different level, you saw that we organized ourselves at your level with the action plan, with the cohesion fund and the CAP fund and the adoption of the plans. We think that what we organized at EU level should happen at all levels of governance, national, regional, local, and also with the stakeholders, and we should have this exchange. And that's the idea. I will be very brief here on the Rural Pact. The Rural Pact is two things. Generally, the Rural Pact is a framework which is organized with participative approach, combining bottom-up and top-down methods. And it should strengthen the multi-level cooperation and governance. This is absolute possibility for everybody to influence the policies, both in Brussels and in the member states. And that's why I invite you to participate very actively in the Rural Pact and to exchange ideas there. And the idea, by the way, for the June conference is that every ministry, every region, every municipality, every stakeholder organization can come and say, these are my commitments. This is how I intend to contribute to this vision, to this rural vision. And that's something very important. And also I would like to mention that so it is a framework, and it is a process, because we are in a long-term process. We are until 2040. The Rural Pact should guarantee that this dynamic process is a little bit structured. And the other reason why we went with this Rural Pact, I mentioned already about the GRI and the AGRI lobbies, but also the rural areas, unfortunately, do not have powerful natural allies. I will illustrate this by saying that the cities, for example, they have the powerful industries. The mayors of the big city are former or future politicians at national, European dimension. Their influence is huge. The administrations, the ministries, etc., are also situated in the cities. And this is not the case for the rural areas. And that's why we need this framework. We need this dialogue. We need this rural pact, and we initiated it to some extent remedy the situation and assist the rural areas to become more visible. Of course, and this is my last message, the Commission alone cannot do it. That's why we are organizing this framework. The Commission alone cannot do everything. We need all the levels, we need all the actors to participate actively in this rural vision implementation. And I stop here, sorry. I prepared also other things, but it will be for another occasion. Thanks.
Thank you, Mario. So I hope we can make it next year again for the remaining points or new points, but thank you very much for your participation and for answering the questions from the panelists. So Hannes, there's a call for your association and the civil society to participate, to join the Rural Pact. So how do you see the next steps?
I would like to take up the last sentence of Mario. The Commission cannot do everything. I think the Commission shouldn't do everything. And that is, of course, the question of what the platform in which the Rural Pact can develop. Who will own it? The ownership of that process is very important. And why? Because I think you mentioned earlier the lobby groups, the Green Lobby Group and the Farmers Lobby Group. Well, those have means to lobby, but civil society usually doesn't have those means to be present, to have the time to participate. So the selection is very early. Who will be possibly present at that kind of pact and who will have the means to really contribute? It's always good to say it's all open, you can all be there. But if I ask a baker who has to do his job, they always say, well, we have no time. If we want to do it, I always take that example, to really elaborate things, to get to actions. We have no time to contribute there. So I think once again, when we talk of stakeholders, we have to make sure that there is a kind of level playing field when it comes to the pact. And where is the support? How can we make that support happen, that people really from the local level with their tiny but important actions, it can be really included in this process and have a say. And I think it was a very good, I remember when we negotiated in the parliament, the cooperation part in rural development and in CAP. The cooperation is really a new spirit. We went through a long time of just talking competition and competitiveness. If we now really want cooperation and want a level playing field for all stakeholders, we have to do a big effort to make that really happen. Otherwise, we will stay in our golden cage of wisdom about what should and could be. Thank you.
Thank you, and there's a very clear message on supporting civil society participation in the next phase. I think the message was clear. So Karen, you represent the science here. So what is your view in a couple of minutes maximum?
Well, I have to say, I really want these improved analysis. I want to knock them in the head of the finance ministries and show where the local economic activities are. What is the local employment? Where's the entrepreneurship happening? And there's today, the circular economy also has a lot of collaboration, which we today do not really are able to show. It is so that you ask for support for your business, maybe from innovation funds, for example, in Denmark, but you cannot ask as a cluster. It's always individual businesses. That was just an example. So I think it's to empower people with solid but renewed analysis of local economic contributions to the GDP as such is very, very important. But then, of course, the whole issue around, do they listen to us? And I think there's some very good ideas on either we are using the SHERPA maps, or we are getting new associations of rural mayors, or how we're going to empower them. I saw somebody wrote about the Erasmus program. As far as I know, there's something called the Grundtvig program, which I think is for apprentices, and so they can use. And maybe one should also focus more on that kind of exploration, not only let academics travel, but also others at college level and in more vocal training, that they could get into exchange and learn both about democracy and about new skills. I think that would be my final comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, really, to the three of you. We really took more than the time that was planned. So thank you for joining. I do hope you will agree to join next year. I think it's interesting to have an annual rendezvous, you know, and see the progress that has been made and have such a lively debate. Thank you really much to the three of you.